My reflex, flinch. It happens before I even realize it. A sound, a movement, a sudden shift in tone, and my body tightens, almost like a silent alarm going off beneath my skin. My shoulders rise, my breath catches. My eyes dart, searching for safety. It's not always dramatic, not something others might notice. But I do. Every time. They call it a reflex flinch, a split-second reaction the body makes to protect itself. A reflex is automatic, involuntary. But over time I've learned that not all flinches are born from physical threats. Some come from wounds you can't see, old memories, sharp words, loneliness that lingers too long. Sometimes it's the echo of pain rather than pain itself that makes you flinch. When I was younger, I thought flinching was something only scared people did. I associated it with weakness, with fear, with being caught off guard. But now, I know it's deeper than that. A reflex flinch is the body remembering what the mind has tried to forget. It's the nervous system saying, "Last time this happened, something hurt." It wasn't always this way. There was a time when I didn't react so quickly, when I felt more open, more at ease in the world. But life has a way of layering us in armor, especially if we've been hurt. And so the flinch became a part of me. Not just when I heard loud noises or sudden movements, but when someone raised their voice, when someone interrupted me sharply, when someone looked at me in a way that reminded me of disapproval I used to fear. One moment I always come back to is a day in school when I got an answer wrong in front of the entire class. It was a small thing, kids do it all the time. But that day, the teacher didn't just correct me. She embarrassed me. Her voice, her tone, her disappointed eyes, they all carved something into me that I didn't realize would stay. And from then on, I flinched at correction. Even helpful feedback felt like an attack. My body had learned that being wrong meant being shamed. It's easy to tell someone, "Don't take it personally," or "You're just being sensitive." But a reflex flinch isn't a choice. It's a story the body tells itself before you can speak. And over time, it becomes a language you can't help but understand. When I started therapy, one of the first things the therapist noticed was that I flinched slightly whenever they leaned forward or asked a question that felt too direct. I wasn't even aware of it until they pointed it out gently. "You seem to pull back a little when I ask that. Did you notice?" I hadn't. But once they said it, I couldn't unsee it. I started noticing the flinch everywhere. In my conversations, in my relationships, in the way I avoided certain truths. It wasn't just a physical motion. It was emotional. It was protective. It was my way of saying, "I'm not sure if this is safe." And here's the thing. Sometimes it wasn't safe. Sometimes people did hurt me when I was vulnerable. Sometimes they laughed at my dreams, ignored my fears, or turned away when I needed them. So my flinch learned to come early, to arrive before the blow, to anticipate danger, even if it wasn't there. That's the exhausting part about the reflex flinch. It doesn't wait to find out if something is safe. It reacts first, just in case. It becomes a habit, a constant readiness. And while it protects you from pain, it also builds a wall between you and the world, between you and connection, between you and your own peace. But I've also learned that the flinch can change, not disappear entirely, but soften. Now, when I feel that jolt of fear or tension rise up, I don't shame myself for it. I don't say, "What's wrong with me?" I say, "What is this trying to tell me?" Sometimes, the flinch is a reminder of a boundary I need. Other times, it's a sign of an old story I'm still carrying. Either way, it's not my enemy. It's a message. And when I listen, I start to heal. I remember a conversation I had with someone I care about. They said something that stung, not because it was cruel, but because it touched a tender spot I hadn't shared. I felt the flinch in my chest, in the tightening of my jaw, the urge to shut down and pull away. But instead of retreating, I took a breath and said, "That hit something sensitive for me. Can we talk about it?" That was one of the bravest things I've done. Not because it was loud, but because it was honest, and because I stayed. The reflex flinch used to pull me out of moments like that. Now, I try to let it be the beginning, not the end. A signal that something needs care, not hiding. And every time I do, I feel a little stronger, a little more grounded, a little more me. So when people ask, "Why do you react like that?" or "Why are you so guarded?" I don't say much. Most wouldn't understand the thousands of quiet moments that shaped that reflex, but I know, and I give myself grace. I give grace to the child I was, the teenager who tried to fit in, the young adult who thought staying silent was safer than being seen. I give grace to all the versions of me who flinched and kept going. Because here's the truth. The reflex flinch is not a flaw. It's a sign that you've been through something and survived. That your body remembered when your mind couldn't. That you kept showing up, even when part of you wanted to hide. And now, each time I notice it, I don't panic. I pause. I ask, is this a real threat or an old echo? More often than not, it's the latter. And that realization, that awareness, is where the healing begins. So yes, I still flinch, but I also breathe. I stay. I soften. Because I'm learning that it's safe to be here now, safe to speak, safe to feel, safe to be seen. And that kind of healing, the kind that starts with a flinch and ends with peace, is the quietest, most powerful kind of strength I've ever known. There are days when I hardly notice the flinch at all. Days when I laugh freely, speak my truth without hesitation, and move through the world as though the walls have finally come down. But then something happens. A misunderstood glance, a critical word, a silence that lasts a beat too long, and just like that, the reflex returns. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's barely noticeable, a slight tightening in the chest or a flicker of doubt behind the eyes. But I feel it. I always feel it. And when I do, I'm reminded of how deeply the nervous system remembers, even when the conscious mind tries to forget. I've learned to trace the flinch back to its source, like following a thread through a maze. The path often leads me through memories I've packed away neatly, filed under "no longer matters," or "that was a long time ago." But trauma, even in its mildest forms, doesn't care how much time has passed. It lingers in the body until it's acknowledged. There was a time when I flinched at kindness. When someone looked at me with genuine care, my instinct was to recoil, to question their motives. Why are they being nice? What do they want? It was easier to expect rejection than to accept love. And that was perhaps the saddest flinch of all. The one that came not from danger, but from the unfamiliarity of tenderness. Over time, with help, I began to understand that the flinch isn't always about fear. Sometimes it's about surprise. Sometimes it's the body saying, "I don't recognize this feeling yet." Like when someone speaks to you with softness and your whole being doesn't know how to respond because it's only known sharpness. That too is a reflex. That too is a wound. The real work of healing, I've found, isn't in forcing the flinch to go away. It's in meeting it with compassion, in sitting with it long enough to say, "I see you. I know where you came from. And you don't have to protect me like that anymore." One of the most powerful things a therapist once told me was, "You've taught your body to stay in survival mode, but now you're allowed to live." That sentence broke something open in me. I had been so conditioned to anticipate harm that even joy felt suspicious. Even safety felt like a trap. It took time, months, years, for me to start trusting ease, trusting quiet, trusting love. I began noticing patterns. I flinched when someone interrupted me because I once lived in a space where my voice wasn't valued. I flinched at criticism because I grew up equating mistakes with shame. I flinched when someone got too close emotionally because I had learned that closeness could lead to abandonment. These weren't random reactions. They were stories written on my skin. And yet, Even knowing this didn't make the flinch disappear overnight. That's the thing about healing. It's not linear. One day you feel invincible, the next you're right back in the heart of your old wounds. But the difference is, now I notice. Now I don't blame myself for the flinch. I hold it with care. There are still moments when someone's words hit me like a sting, not because they're meant to hurt, but because they touch an unhealed part of me. In those moments, I try not to react immediately. I breathe. I check in with myself. Is this about now, or is this about before? And more often than not, it's the past whispering through the present. What's interesting is that the more I understand my flinch, the more I notice it in others. I see it in how someone withdraws mid-conversation. I see it in how someone deflects a compliment or avoids eye contact when sharing something vulnerable. We're all carrying our own reflexes, shaped by stories that haven't been fully told. That realization has made me softer with myself, softer with others, because behind every flinch is a history. Behind every overreaction is a moment when someone didn't feel safe. And knowing that makes me want to be a safer place, for myself and for the people I care about. There's a beauty in being aware of your own flinch, not because it's pleasant, but because it's honest. It means you're no longer moving through life on autopilot. You're listening. You're learning. You're choosing how to respond instead of simply reacting. And that shift, from reaction to response, is where healing begins. I've also started talking more openly about it with friends. There's something deeply freeing about saying, hey, when that happened, I kind of shut down for a moment. I think it triggered something old. The right people understand. They don't judge. They don't rush me. They simply hold space. And in that space, I feel seen. The flinch hasn't disappeared. But now, it's not something I fight. It's something I understand. And that makes all the difference. Every time I stay in the moment after the flinch, every time I choose honesty over silence, every time I let someone in, even just a little, I reclaim something. Become a little less guarded, a little more open, a little more me. And that's what healing really is. Not becoming someone else, but returning to who you were before the world taught you to flinch. And that kind of healing, the kind that starts with a flinch and ends with peace, is the quietest, most powerful kind of strength I've ever known.